Good evening, everyone. I'm Mayor Pro Tem Richard Segal, and I call this special called public hearing to order. This evening, we're going to hold a public hearing for the purpose of accepting public comment regarding the proposed Douglasville Redevelopment Plan that has been prepared for the Tax Allocation District within the City of Douglasville. At this time, I'd like to ask everybody to silence your electronic devices. Advise you that this meeting is being recorded and will be available for view on the city's YouTube channel as well. I'd like to invite the city manager to present on the content of the matter being discussed. Marcia Hampton.
Good evening, everyone. I'll be very, very brief. Just to make certain that everyone understands, this is a public hearing on the redevelopment plan that helps to support what we hope to have as a tax allocation district within the city. So we do have our consultants here with us that will go through the redevelopment plan, so please make your notes. Feel free to ask questions when the time is appropriate. We will make certain we leave enough time for you to do so. But again, just reminding you all that this is our public hearing that is required for us to start that process. So with that, I will turn it over to Gary.
Well, good evening, everyone. It's a pretty good crowd. Usually we don't get this many people to show up for these things, so that's good. We have been working with the City Council since about February. Met with them several times, worked with staff to present what's going to be before you tonight. As some of you may know, about a year ago, the voters of Douglasville passed a referendum authorizing the City Council to exercise redevelopment powers. In order to do that, they must first adopt a plan in compliance with state law, and that is a prerequisite to be able to do anything within that area. The types of incentives that this plan would enable is what's called tax increment financing, and I will get into that a little bit later in terms of what it actually is. The area of the city where those incentives can be applied must qualify under the law, meeting certain conditions of economic and population, et cetera, which again I will go through that. That is called a redevelopment area. And within a redevelopment area, the specific real estate, the specific tax parcels, which can be subject to these incentives, is called a tax allocation district. So I just try to get the terminology for you before we get into it. And typically, a redevelopment area, again, must qualify under the law to meet certain thresholds and justify the use of these powers by the municipality. And those can be high development costs, property assembly issues, high market risk and competition from other areas of the county for development, inadequate infrastructure, those types of things, and the population living within that area has some level of need. And again, the tax allocation district is the map where these incentives could be offered. The redevelopment plan also gives communities broad discretion in terms of what they would do with any funds if those funds are made available, and it requires that the city discuss what it hopes to do with those revenues. What's your plan? How would you invest them, et cetera, et cetera. Creating a tax allocation district does not do some things that is kind of a misconception that a lot of people have. The first thing to know that creating a TAD does not impose a tax increase on anybody, nor does it grant a tax abatement to anybody living within that district. That's the first thing to understand. It doesn't have anything to do with eminent domain. It does not give the City Council any powers of eminent domain that it does not already possess for other things. It does not authorize immediately any type of city spending. Does not require the city to issue bonds. Those are decisions that are made later. Typically 2 to 3 years down the road, the City Council would consider those types of actions. it does not immediately qualify any property, any developer within the TAD to receive any public funds. There's a number of steps that need to be done first. We have to get the city and the county and the school district's consent to participate. The city has to set some policies for the private sector to apply for these funds. So again, there are more hurdles down the road. This is just the first step. And then finally, by the city adopting this plan, this does not bind the county or the school district to do anything. That's the next step after the plan is adopted, to go to the county and the school district and seek their consent, which their elected officials by majority vote would need to grant. So the city will need to make its case to those entities. This graphic talks a little bit about how tax increment financing has worked, how it works. If this plan is approved and the TAD is created, at the end of this year, the tax digest within the TAD would be set as the base. And any future taxes collected in proportion to that base would be used for general fund expenses like they always are. It's the growth in revenue as the tax base increases above the base, that those revenues, instead of being used for general fund purposes, would be put into a special fund for redevelopment. And if the county and the school district consented to participate, their incremental taxes would also go into this city fund to enable to be used for redevelopment. The only tax revenue that goes into this fund are property taxes, and they're on real estate. The city is not thinking about pledging sales taxes. It's not thinking about pledging commercial personal property. It's just property taxes on the real estate. And then typically TADs have a finite life. They're usually 30 years. This redevelopment plan says it's the city's goal to have everything done within 30 years. They can go as long as 50 years. And if things go really well and the local government decides, they can dissolve the TAD prior to 30 years. So what would specifically a TAD be used for in Douglasville? Well, the city's been working on a number of planning initiatives for several years now. The downtown master plan being one, the north side redevelopment plan. So these were kind of the major objectives that the city would like to use redevelopment powers to help implement. Again, the law says that we have to have at least one public hearing. That's tonight. And basically what I'm going to try to do tonight is briefly summarize the contents of this plan, so you understand what's the objective of the plan, where is the tax allocation district, define your particular, if you happen to own property within the TAD, to be able to find it, etc. These prior studies kind of concentrate in a fairly large area. This slide shows the downtown study area. It shows the area that's going to be impacted by the realignment of State Route 92, and the dashed line in black is the study area for the north side redevelopment plan. So we started there, and we wanted to make sure that the redevelopment area at least encompassed those main geographies. So we drew the redevelopment area as shown in this graphic. And what the southern boundary of the redevelopment area is formed by Interstate 20, Fairburn Road goes through it, Route 5 goes through it, and it basically goes from I-20 north to the city limits, the northern city limits of Douglasville. These blue dots are shown are apartment developments, some market rate, some senior, some subsidized or assisted, but you can see there are a lot of apartment communities in the redevelopment area. We go through the plan to establish whether it's eligible under the statute. We definitely determined that this is an appropriate area and it meets the state definition. About 44% of the city's population lives in this redevelopment area. It's heavily minority. The median age is younger than the city as a whole. The income levels are are lower than the city as a whole. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Income levels are lower than the city as a whole. So by all of the requirements of the statute, this area qualifies. Again, what is the strategy as outlined in the plan? Well, you are fortunate in this community to have one of the few authentic downtown areas on the north side. You've recognized that as an asset for many years. Voters have made it a long-standing priority to encourage revitalization of the downtown, to encourage revitalization of some of the neighborhoods, the old historical neighborhoods around downtown. You've had 4 pretty major studies conducted over the last decade, and those documents really outline the strategy for this plan. This plan is a tool to help implement plans that have already been adopted by the city and you haven't had the funds to implement. And then in addition to that, we suspect, based on the North Side plan, that the relocation of State Route 92 is going to have some impact on this area. Hopefully positive in the long run. So we wanted to make sure that neighborhoods impacted by that public improvement are also included. What the TAD funds would be used for is to selectively help major, what's called catalyst projects within this area, projects that would help to increase the value of all properties around them, increase investment, and then hopefully over time, as the tax digest increases, the city would have resources to make public improvements in the area. These plans outline a lot of public improvements like parks, like trails, bike trails, pedestrian trails, street improvements, a whole range of public improvements that this is one revenue source that could help. One of the constraints in the redevelopment powers law is that only 10% of the city's digest can be placed in a tax allocation district. This slide simply just calculates what that can be. Your total tax digest in 2018, when we wrote this plan, the 2019 digest hadn't been finalized. Tax digest is about $1.4 billion. So about $136 million can be within a tax allocation district. That's a maximum, one or several in the city. The city council did not want to go that high. They asked us to keep it below that cap. So we tried to settle in on a range of about 6 to 7% of the tax digest in a TAD. That gives the city flexibility to do other things in the future, although we did look at the city closely as part of this process, and I would say that the probability that there are other parts of the city that could be TADs in the future is probably pretty low. I think we've tried to capture all of the immediate needs and opportunities in this one district. This map shows the boundaries of the district. Compared to other TADs in Georgia, this one is probably larger than the average. There's almost 1,400 parcels. There's almost 1,500 acres. The taxable digest is about $93.3 million, again with 2018 values. And that's about just under 7% of the city's tax digest. Probably will be a little smaller when the 2019 numbers come out. What we tried to do, again, is to incorporate those study areas that we showed you on the preceding map to capture most of the commercial corridors in the study area, some older neighborhoods that can use some assistance, but you can see that a lot of these holes within the gray shaded area, those are established single-family residential neighborhoods. And we tried to avoid those as much as possible where housing is built, when the areas are built out, for 2 reasons. One, we did not want to adversely impact the school district to the extent we could avoid it. And secondly, there was probably not a whole lot of value to be gained from including moving the district boundaries into those neighborhoods. So that's the rationale behind the district itself. There is a list of specific parcels in the back of the redevelopment plan that lists every parcel individually, has their map lot number, the acreage, et cetera. This map kind of shows where projects might be. The yellow dash line is the corridor, the 92 realignment. The smaller dots show apartment developments, which might benefit from redevelopment, and the larger green areas are areas where projects have been identified in the downtown plan and the north side plan. We did a forecast of this area. This area today, again, has a base digest. Everything in red is about $93 million in tax digest. That's the 40% value. We believe that if all of the projects implemented in these various plans are completed, there could be another $82 million in tax digest added on top of that number over the next 6 to 10 years. And that's where the revenue for the Tax Allocation District would come from that $82.7 million in additional growth. This forecasts that revenue growth out over a period of years, and over 30 years, it's a significant amount of money. It's almost $89 million in tax revenue. Again, takes 30 years to collect all that money, and it assumes that both the county and the school district would consent. If they don't consent, if only the county consents, that red line the bars would be about half of what's projected here. And if neither the county or the school district consent, then it's probably not worth the city continuing on its own. But that's the forecast, and that's a significant amount of money, and the city could do a significant amount of good with it. Realistically, about $45 to $65 million in revenue could be leveraged for projects. And again, if the city considers a financing mechanism, that $40 to $60 million really translates to about, if it were to be bonded in one or two tranches, it's about $22 million in funds, bond funds, that could be invested for various purposes. So again, as a requirement of the plan, in this table we've outlined, again, working with staff and the city council, a general list of the types of uses, the types of things that would be funded with these revenues. And again, you need redevelopment to create the revenues in the first place. So if nothing happens in the district, this money never materializes. But assuming good decisions are made tactically, and there's $22 million available, about half of that would be set aside to help incentivize developers to take risks and build projects that would change the character of the area and set the stage for additional growth, about $11 million. And then the rest of those items above that are public improvements. They're parks, they're streets, they're, again, placemaking, investments in placemaking, trails, et cetera. The types of public improvements that if the TAD didn't exist, voters might vote to tax themselves to pay for those kinds of improvements. So this is one way to pay for things that you might not otherwise be able to afford. Some other just basic things in the redevelopment plan, if you're so inclined to read the whole document. Some important things. First of all, the City Council is going to be the redevelopment agency for the TAD. They're in communities the size of Douglasville. That's typically what's done, and it's the most appropriate way. It's to be the City Council that makes decisions on who gets funds, how projects are financed, et cetera, et cetera. It says that everything in this plan is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan and future land use plan. It acknowledges that part of this TAD includes the city's existing historic district. The state law is pretty specific about how TAD should treat established historic districts, and it basically says that nothing in this redevelopment plan would negatively impact anything in place in terms of the city's historic district ordinance, et cetera. It establishes a potential 30-year life with the understanding that that may change, and it provides the City Council with flexibility to use different approaches to get things done. It gives them the authorization to consider issuing bonds, but does not say they will. And bonds are just one revenue tool among several that can be used, again, to get projects done. There's a section in the report that's a requirement of the law called the school system impact analysis on Douglas County Public Schools. It's in the document. We will present that information to the school district if, as part of that request for consent. And this TAD affects about 2% of the county and school district's total digest. And again, it lists all the individual parcels in the appendix. So what happens next? Well, the law says the council has 45 days after today to hold a meeting for the purpose of voting on a resolution to create the Tax Allocation District and to adopt the redevelopment plan. I believe tentatively that vote is scheduled for September 16th. Can always change, but that's the current date. I believe that a second public hearing would be held on that night in advance of that vote, so additional testimony could be taken at that time. And at that time, the city council could vote to adopt the plan, not adopt the plan, or table the plan to do more work if it's determined that's necessary, and bring it up again later for another vote. If the resolution passes, the TAD is created as of the end of the year. The city will make a request to the county tax assessor to certify the base value of the district as of December 31st of the end of this year, which would enable the city to start marketing, start negotiating with potential developers, probably starting with the jail site, I would imagine, sometime during 2020. And the process to seek county and school district consent could start as soon as the plan is adopted, or it could dribble into next year. That's entirely local politics, and that basically what happens next. If you want a copy of the plan, there are instructions if you want to read the whole document, and we can take testimony at this time.
All right, so at this time, we're going to open it up to public comment. Anybody who wishes to ask a question or make a comment is invited up to the microphone so that the video can actually capture your comments. So we are open. And don't be shy. Would any of the elected officials like to make a comment? You're welcome to step up to the microphone as well. City staff. All right, here we go. Thank you. Leaving me hanging.
I'm not sure if I can actually talk because I'm not properly a citizen of Douglasville, but
It's a public hearing, you're public.
Great.
So welcome.
simple question. Has there been any conversation with the school district and with the county, and would you care to estimate their likelihood to get on board with this as well?
Let's not put the cart before the horse. We need to approve it first. So that's all I'm going to say on that. Anyone else? Yes, sir. Welcome.
Thank you. Are there any plans to incorporate any type of alternative energy with these designs? Solar panels, EV parking?
Any developer who wants to come to the city with the project and include that are welcome to. The plan as put forward does not actually specifically address it in terms of seeking it or not. I think that would be a great idea if they did. Anyone else? Come on, I know there's more. I don't want to close it prematurely. Madam Mayor, would you like to say any words? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. I apologize for being late. I was at the Water and Sewer Authority Board of Directors meeting, and we had a long meeting this evening, so it was about 5 minutes late. And I thank you so much, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, for standing in my stead. And I appreciate all the citizens coming out tonight. This is overwhelming with excitement that we have so many citizens that are interested and want to see the city move forward and continue to progress. And so this tax allocation district is just another vehicle for us to accomplish what you say as citizens that you want in the community. And we invite you to come to every meeting. And of course, once we have the map and we are considering those parcels, that you would make your desires known if you are in favor of it or not. And of course, all of those innovative ideas about energy and whatever else developers want to come as soon as the tax allocation district is approved, we will invite you to come. And I will say that it's looking optimistic with our partners in the city, county, and school district. And I'll just say that it's optimistic. Thank you so much.
All right, last chance for any other public comments. If not, then you're welcome to come back on September 16th when we are expected to vote on this. We'll have another public hearing at that time, same place, same bat channel. And at this time, then, I will close this public hearing. No other business coming for this body. We are in adjournment.